Hey YouTube, today we're going to be looking at a couple dinosaur handgun designs, and I call it a dinosaur design because that's what a lot of people, especially the younger generations, think of these two. We're going to compare the triggers to between a 1911 and a revolver. Now, generally speaking, a lot of people that are in the firearms community that have knowledge of firearms can agree that a 1911 has one of the best triggers that you can put your hands on. It's just a fact. They just have a really good trigger, the way it's designed and all that. And I was inspired to do this video by a certain viewer who somewhat agrees with me, but he thinks that a revolver actually has a better trigger, and he may be right. So we're going to sit there and compare them between a couple of these common type revolvers and the 1911. Now, I've chosen double action revolvers because that's generally what people's going to be working with. I don't have a single action only revolver on here. I'm going to use just double action revolvers because they're the most common types. So basically, I have two 357 Magnum revolvers here on the right. That's going to be your most common ones because we'll shoot 38 specials or 357 Magnums. I have two 44 Magnums, so people that like the more powerful, big caliber revolvers, and I have two common Colt 1911s here in the middle. And I figured these would be the perfect ones to compare to. I have new stuff, old stuff, I have everything in between here. So what we're going to start off with, we're going to start looking at this 1911, and I'm going to show you that there's nothing in it. This is a common Colt 1911. This is a Series 70 Government model. And I'll show you some of the close-ups and see it says Government model on the side. On the other side, it just says Series 70 Colt Government model. And this is chambered in 45 ACP. Now, this pistol is the gold standard for what people consider a good trigger, and this is about the most common one you can get. There's no bells or whistles on it. There's nothing been tuned on it. This is just how you would have received it. So it's very similar to what you would buy today if you were just going to buy a common off-the-shelf 1911. And the thing that makes a 1911 so great is the trigger on it, and the trigger design actually goes straight back into the frame. There's no pivot point or anything like that, and it's going to give you the best feel. So when you pull this hammer back to this thing and engage the grip safety, I'm going to get a real close up of this. If you'll look, you get a little bit of take up on this trigger, and you run into a definite wall. When you pull the trigger, it is so crisp, but there's no grittiness or anything about it. And when you reset this trigger, there's a tactile reset, and there it pulls. There's just not a lot of movement there. The thing about a 1911 trigger is because the way it operates, your finger stays in the same position on the trigger through the whole pull. So if you'll notice, it's not pivoting. Wherever you put the pad of your finger on here, it's going to stay there, and you're not going to have to worry about any pivoting moves. Now, this is a real common one, and I would say this trigger pull is going to be around 5 poundish, give or take. There's nothing been done to it or anything like that. And what a lot of people don't understand is triggers. It's how good a trigger is not based on just what the pound pull is, not how light it is or how heavy it is. It's how it operates. But you can get a 1911, you can tune it, you can get a little bit lighter trigger, you can get it feel a little bit smoother with some of these new souped up hyper guns of the days from these higher end companies. And what I have here, this one isn't real souped up, but this is a Colt Gold Cup. So this is from the same time era, and this had a gunsmith tune on it. So they hand fitted it together, made everything work a lot smoother than the previous one. It's got a little bit longer trigger on it, and that's all personal preference for your length of pull on it and how you feel that you operate the handgun. This trigger is going to be a little bit better than the one I just showed you because it's actually been tuned by a gunsmith when this thing was built. That's what these were known for. Let me show you the side of it. It says Gold Cup on it, and on the other side it says the same thing as the other one, only it says Gold Cup National Match. So if you work this trigger, you'll see that it just moves straight back. It goes to a definite wall. There's that much take up in it, and this one is really light, folks. And the reset on this one is going to be the same thing. It's just going to be a lighter pull. That's the reset, and then it goes off. You're not going to get much better of a trigger than these 1911s, period, when you're talking about a semi-automatic handgun. Now, when you start moving into revolvers, it's a whole different game. It's just a completely different game, folks. It's a different feel. So we're going to pick up, this is a 686. This is an older 686, no dash. And the trigger pull on a double action revolver, now you got to remember, a revolver is going to pivot when you move it, but a trigger pull on that, the double action, especially this one's got some action work done to it. The most important thing is it has to be smooth all the way through when you pull back. Now this trigger pull is going to be around, give or take, 7 pounds when you pull back, and that's pretty light for a double action revolver. But the most important thing is it's smooth all the way through, and this one is, folks. This one's been finely tuned by a gunsmith, and it works real well. Now we're people that are target shooting is the double action. Now, there's some advantages and disadvantages, and this one's got a pretty light trigger on them, but you don't have that take-up that you would have with the 1911, so you're not going to run into a definite wall. You just need to rest your finger on it, acquire the target, and just apply pressure, and it's going to go off, and this one's going to go off rather quickly. Is that good? It can be good, but you can get, if you're target shooting, you're trying to precision shoot, you need to be ready for this thing to go off. You need to have it straight on the target, and you need to be ready when it goes off. But if you can figure out how to train with this thing and all that, this thing has an exceptional trigger. Now, when you're shooting double action, the problem with double action is the trigger pull is going to be quite a bit more heavy than a semi-automatic pistol. So what that does is you have to apply more pressure to this pistol, and what a lot of people do is, I'm just holding this thing here for this camera, when you're applying this pressure, you can move this thing around as you're trying to apply the pressure, and that's where you lose your target acquisition and you start getting inaccurate hits. Now this one is going to be a lot harder to do that too, because it's had such a finely tuned action. Older Smith & Wesson, a little bit of work done on it, has a great trigger. Now, we're going to compare that to a Colt Python. This is supposed to be the gold standard for a revolver trigger. Now, this one's right out of the box. This one's never been worked on. This is from the 1980s. This is a stainless gun. And if you look at this double action or single action pull, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a really, really crisp, light trigger. So you just acquire your target and pull on it, and it goes off. Now, this one is a rather smooth double action pull also, but what a lot of people don't understand about this Colt Python is it's so complicated on the inside. These older ones are. There's a lot of moving parts, so you're going to feel a little bit more tension. It's called stacking when it gets here before you pull it. So it gets a little bit heavier towards the end. It's going to be about the same pull as that Smith & Wesson right there, but it gets a little bit heftier right there. Now, personally, I think that's a plus, because if I'm shooting a target with this, if I'm target shooting and I pull back on that, I can sort of stage it right there before it goes off. So I can get my target lined up and I can stage it right there, get my target lined up and pull it. I think that's a plus to it. It just makes it a very easy gun to shoot. Very good trigger on the Colt Python. They've always been known for that because they have a lot of handwork that went into them when they were building them. Now, when you get into the larger frame pistols, the big 44 Magnums, it's going to be the same thing. And I have an older Smith & Wesson here also that's had work done to it. And it's going to be the same thing. When you pull back your single action on this thing, there's no take-up on it. You just acquire your target and pull the trigger. And it's a pretty light trigger also. Now, with the extensive work that's been done on the inside of this action, it's the same thing. It's just smooth all the way through. And that's very important if you when you're shooting double action, is to not shift this thing around. And that's what makes that Python a little bit different. I'm not going to say it's worse, but a little bit different. It doesn't go as the same pull all the way through. It goes like this, and it kind of stacks a little bit where you can stage it, which can be an advantage when shooting it. Now, when you look at the newer stuff that's out today, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm probably going to get a lot of enemies out of this, is the Colts seem to have the edge, because this one's an untouched Colt. This is a Colt Anaconda. untouched, just like this Colt Python is. And if you do the single action to this thing, it's going to be the same thing. It's just going to be acquire your target. There's no take up on it. You're already on the wall, and you just apply pressure and it goes off. Now, with the double action, this one doesn't do the stacking. There is no staging. It's just smooth all the way through. You can just feel how smooth this trigger operates all the way through. So it's not going to give you a lot of error when you're moving around like this, like trying to pull it. But you got to remember, folks, it's not going to be the 3.5, 4 pound triggers that you have on these 1911s. So which one do I think is better? To be honest with you, I really don't have an answer for you because they're two completely different designs. The semi-automatic 1911s are, bar none, probably one of the most comfortable and best triggers you're ever going to feel on a handgun. But if you're taking these things out, and we're just talking about target shooting and seeing how accurate you can get these things, a single action revolver, when you shoot it in single action, it's going to be hard to beat those triggers. They're going to be lighter than 1911, and it's going to be no take up. There's going to be no room for error here. You're not going to have to do any pulling, any adjusting. There's no take up. All you need to do is rest your finger on the trigger, acquire the target, and just apply pressure, and it's going to go off. So I think when you're single action shooting revolver, a modern revolver, and we're talking about good ones, I believe the revolver is going to have a little bit better of an edge. But if you're trying to precise shoot or you're trying to fast shoot a revolver, I think the 1911 is going to have a little bit of edge over it because the 1911 has an exceptional trigger. It's just the way it's designed, and it's going to be a better trigger. Also, I've already mentioned with the 1911, the trigger design, it goes straight back into the frame. With a revolver, you have a pivot point up here. So this whole thing's going to pivot on here. So you're going to have to feel a little bit different of a pull on it. Your finger may move a little bit on there. All depends on how precise you are. But in all, it's basically what you choose to shoot. Whether you like a revolver or whether you like a 1911, they're both going to have pretty good triggers on them if you choose a good one in the revolver thing. Now, there is some junk revolvers out there. They probably have a 15-pound pull on the double action. They're real gritty, and the actions aren't designed as well as these right here. I picked some really nice ones here to show you. If you're going to pick revolvers and you want to go out target shooting, just make sure you get a good one or get somebody capable to make it good. I'm not telling you to only pick Colt or Smith & Wesson here. That's just the two that I prefer over all of them. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to run through and compare triggers and let you know, I don't think one's better than the other. I just think it's a completely different shooting experience and a completely different feel. I think they're both good for what they're designed for and what you're trying to use them for. But anyway, folks, let me know what you think. Which one do you think has the better trigger feel? The 1911 or the revolvers, the double action revolvers? Anyway, thank you very much for watching my video today, and you folks have a great day.